Hi, it's Julia Ray, and this is A Deeper Look. I believe the most important stories are the ones deep within us. The stories that make us feel alone, yet connect us when we're brave enough to tell them. Tune in every Wednesday to dive into the deep end together. Hi, everyone. Welcome to A Deeper Look. I'm your host, Julia Ray, and I guess I'm your guest this week too, since this is my first solo episode. If I'm being honest, I've kind of been dreading recording this because it feels so foreign and awkward to me to talk to myself for an extended period of time. So I'm probably going to keep this one a little shorter than usual, and bear with me since this is my first go at a solo episode. But I really wanted to take a deeper look at cystic fibrosis and what life has looked like for me as a child and now as an adult living with this chronic illness. And I got some great questions from you guys, so thank you so much for sending them in. I'll be answering a few of those. I guess for anyone who has never heard me talk about cystic fibrosis before, or someone who hasn't listened to episode 1, where I do go into it a bit there, I'm going to give a little bit of a background about what cystic fibrosis is and when I was diagnosed, all of that stuff. So cystic fibrosis is a genetic chronic disease. It affects the lungs, the digestive system, the sinuses. It is on the cellular level, the genetic defect is. So it really affects the whole body. It's a recessive gene. So my older brother has CF. My oldest brother does not have cystic fibrosis. And my parents knew to test for me when they got pregnant with me for CF. And they knew there was a 25% chance that they would have a baby with CF when they found out they were pregnant with me. And I always think the way the geneticist phrased it for my mom, since she already had 2 boys, she was hoping for a girl. And the geneticist called my mom and said, we have some good news and some hard news. And the good news is you're going to have your baby girl. And the hard news is she's going to share the fight with her brother. And I will say, having, a built-in best friend that also shared my pathology growing up made it seem very normal to do 2 hours of breathing treatments every day because we were both doing it together. In fact, I was convinced all of my friends were going home from their play dates to do a nebulizer and a vest treatment. So when I was about 6 or 7, up until that point, my parents had to do manual chest PT to me and pound on my chest to move and shake up the thick, sticky mucus in my lungs to get a little sciencey. If you can tell, I'm not sciencey since I just used the word sciencey. CF essentially is our cells have broken salt channels. And so we excrete more salt than we're supposed to, which then leads to thick, sticky mucus in our lungs, and therefore chronic lung infections and partial lung collapses. And that's just how it is and manifests in a progressive way. So when we were growing up, my parents had to pound on my chest to loosen that up, try to get it out of my lungs. But then when I was about 6 or 7, they came out with a vest that inflated and hugged my chest really tightly and shook me, which was great because it freed up a lot of time for my parents, I'm sure, dealing with 2 kids with CF and trying to pound on them multiple times a day. Was very time consuming and also just probably heartbreaking. When I think back to my parents and how I'm almost the age that they were when they had me and therefore 2 chronically ill children, I just think of how devastating that must have been for them and how hard of a time to cope with that news must have been for them, because I think I have to imagine, I'm not a parent myself yet, but all you want is for your child to be healthy and to be told that your child and your unborn child are going to suffer has to be an unimaginable amount of pain and worry and fear. So I always think of my parents and just kind of how heroic they were in honestly never showing that to me. And my brother, I never saw the fear in their face at our doctor's appointments, but I know it had to be there. But so yeah, we grew up doing that together. And I really honestly, I think one of the questions actually is something like, what age, one of the questions from you guys was, what age did you comprehend the gravity of your illness and that other kids weren't sick? I don't know that I comprehended the gravity of cystic fibrosis at a young age, even when I do vividly remember when I realized that not everybody had CF and not everybody was going home to do breathing treatments. It was when I was hospitalized for the first time that I was aware that I was hospitalized, and I was about 7 years old. And I started to clock the fact that, wait, my classmates are visiting me in the hospital, but I have never visited one of them in the hospital. What's going on here? Like, I'm missing something. Why is this the case? And I used to have conversations with my mom about it, but even back then I wasn't asking like, why me? I think because, and this is pre like strict infection control in children's hospitals, especially for CF patients. But back then I had roommates in my hospital room, and my roommates were suffering in ways that felt and were greater than my suffering. And so I think when you do grow up in and out of the hospital, you can grow up with this like greater perspective of what a gift life is. And maybe that the hand you've been dealt isn't ideal, but you're doing okay. And I really think that became very apparent to me very young. I think when I got to my late teens and early 20s, and I got quite sick when I was in my late teens, very, very sick. I was fighting for my life in my late teens, and I then knew the gravity of my illness. I don't think it really settled in until I was really faced with how sick I could get. So I guess I'll just keep going with these questions. One of them is, what would you tell baby you? Ooh, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I can learn lessons from younger me in that way that, like, don't we all just want to get back that like childlike joie de vivre that comes with not being self-conscious and not having your heart broken or be tainted by, experiences. But I guess I would tell younger me and baby me that it's going to be okay, and that holding on to hope is going to feel worth it someday. But for the most part, I think young me had a really good outlook on life, and I sometimes try to like return to her because I think it's really easy in the world we live in to get caught up in the negative, and I fight that every day. And I have a lot of anxiety, and obviously I don't think like anxiety is something you experience when you're very young. So next question is, do you have to take antibiotics all the time to prevent infections? And the answer to that question now is different than what it was when I was younger. When I was younger, I was on antibiotics every other month, honestly, kind of prophylactically, just to prevent infections from even coming or settling into my lungs. But now we turn to them kind of as a last resort because I'm on a new medication. So I guess I'll go into what that new medication is as well in this question. In 2017, I became eligible for Kalydeco, which is a cystic fibrosis modulator. It's not a cure in the sense that like it's not a cure, full stop, you're good, you take it once and you're done. But it is 2 pills a day, and it goes in and corrects the underlying cause of cystic fibrosis. Up until that point, anything I was doing at home or caring for myself, even in the hospital, was just treating the symptoms of cystic fibrosis. It was just treating the pain, the infections, the mucus. That's what it was doing. This medication truly was a game changer and is a game changer for me and so many others. CF also, because it's genetic, there are thousands of different mutations for cystic fibrosis. And so I don't always share specifics about my regimen and how I take care of myself because it's so bio-individual. I mean, my gosh, my brother and I we have the same exact genetic mutation, but our journeys with cystic fibrosis have been vastly different. And no one can understand why really, other than the fact that we are 2 different human beings and 2 different bodies and 2 different immune systems. And so I think it's really important when you hear someone's journey with a chronic illness to not always make assumptions about your own journey because it is so individual. And it's why it's taken a long time to figure out Kalydeco and Trikafta for all the different mutations. Right now, we're so lucky that 90% of the population can take these CF modulators and are benefiting from them, but we're still waiting for the remaining 10%. There are some incredible gene therapies and other scientific advancements that are underway. And I really do believe that in my lifetime, we will see incredible medications. And I do believe, and I still have hope that there will be a cure for cystic fibrosis in my lifetime. And I think because my lifespan has extended, honestly, every year I get older, I feel like there's years added to my projected lifespan that I don't think about that lifespan at all. It doesn't even kind of come into my view because I know that no one's tomorrow is guaranteed anyway. So focusing on that would just be a waste of today and tomorrow. So, yeah, these CF modulators have truly changed my life. I honestly wouldn't be where I am in my career without them. I know that to be just so true. What is the name of the medicine that changed your life? Kalydeco and now Trikafta is the 2nd generation of the medication. Again, CF modulators. We are just so lucky to be living in a time such as this. How were you able to manage CF while on Listen to Your Heart? Oof. Well, tough because you get sleep deprived on that show. I think the most I slept one of those nights was like 3.5 hours. They really try to keep you awake. And that was not great for my health, but I tried to sneak in naps or beg the producers for naps. But beyond the sleep deprivation, the one thing that I was most kind of looking forward to and excited about with the show was doing my nebulizer on camera, because I know how valuable that would have been for me as a little girl growing up to see somebody doing a nebulizer and making it like someone I could relate to, and also someone I could look up to that was actually putting the time aside to take care of themselves in that way. And I wanted to do that for another little girl. I thought, gosh, CF or asthma, like this could be so beneficial. So I really don't like doing my treatments in front of people. It took me a while to start doing my treatments in front of my like college roommates because I was so self-conscious about it. But I went in to listen to your heart, ready to go, ready to get in front of those cameras with my nebulizers for the sake of other little kids. And I did every single day, did my breathing treatments multiple times a day in front of multiple cameras, sometimes 3 at a time. And when I asked the producers when they were going to air that, they just said they didn't have the footage. So unfortunately, I had no control over the edit of that show and how they chose to tell what version of what happened. But that was honestly very heartbreaking for me, because I definitely saw it as a missed opportunity for valuable representation for little girls with a chronic illness that need somebody to look up to. So that's still something I kind of mourn from that experience. Oh, next question is, what is one thing people can say to make you feel better? I think asking open-ended questions is probably the thing that I value most when I'm discussing cystic fibrosis with people. I think we all want to be heard and seen, and I think these are universal questions we should be saying to one another in general, whether it's about CF or not. Because I think in this fast-paced, surface-level world, there's a lot of ways that we make assumptions about people. And, you know, I look well. I honestly looked pretty well when my lung collapsed when I was 18 years old. But I was having really tough days and really hard, painful days. And so CF has been a reminder to me constantly to never judge a book by its cover, because you can look like you're doing well, but be really having a hard time. So I think asking questions is actually the thing that probably makes me feel better, just to have a good conversation and open that up. Kind of wherever I'm ready for that to go, right? I'm not going to open up to every single person that asks me something about, you know, my mental health necessarily, but I think asking questions about what it's like to have CF and how I manage it and things like that, I always appreciate that, truthfully. The next question is, how and where did you find hope at your worst? Like I said earlier, when I was younger, I really was so hopeful. I just was innately. I don't know where it came from, whether it was just so informed by my family's faith and their own hope. But even though there was nothing tangible to hold on to, you know, even these modulators were not in the pipeline when I was very young, but I still just believed. And I guess maybe that's manifestation. But I think the thing that helps me when I'm at my worst and lowest is returning to service and giving to others. And actually, I just found my diary when I was in 3rd grade. Angelica from Rugrats is on the cover. So that's great. And it's just a reminder to me that I guess I knew at a very young age that using my voice, telling my story in service to others was the thing that would make me feel better. And because I started writing a book. I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the book, Cystic Fibrosis, and I spelled it wrong. It's a hard disease to spell in 3rd grade. I must have just learned what a teaser poem was, because I wrote a teaser poem for the beginning of this book. And I wrote a note to parents about their children. I guess I'll read an excerpt from the note. Dear parents, I am a child with CF, and I know what parents need to do with their child. You have to let them cry, but don't let them get hysterical. I cried hysterically, and it did not help me at all. What you should also do is talk to them soothingly so they can get their feelings out and their emotion free. Because that sure helped me. What? And then I go on. Maybe I'll share some photos of these excerpts. And then I said, sincerely, the author, Julia. I mean, I wrote chapters. How You Get It was one of the chapters. You can do anything a regular kid can do was one of the chapters too. Missing parties and people because you're in the hospital. This must have been right after I was hospitalized during one of my best friend's like big sleepover birthday parties, and I was just devastated to miss it. That must have been fresh on my mind. But yeah, like looking back at this book, I think this was like therapeutic for me to get my feelings out on paper and to share my story. And I thought this was getting published in third grade. And I think kind of having that idea that it would get published probably helped me get out of my own funk of realizing that I had something that my classmates didn't. So yeah, I think even now in my life, always returning back to my nonprofit work and giving back is the thing that keeps me going and keeps my spirits high. That is honestly the answer. I think focusing on service is often the answer to a lot of life's trials. Oh yeah. I wrote a bunch of notes on here, so I'm missing some questions. But one of the other things that I wanted to talk about is the effect that a chronic illness can have on your mental health. There were some questions about that I got, and something that was pretty jarring to me was I was not given an evaluation, a mental health evaluation, until 2016. I was 24 years old, and I was getting ready to run the New York City Marathon for the Boomer Esiason Foundation, and it was the first time where I went to my CF clinic. Typically, we go every other month to check in with our doctors and make sure everything looks good. And this particular time, they had me fill out a mental health questionnaire. And I didn't expect it, but I broke down at that appointment, filling out this questionnaire. You know, I had just been Miss Philadelphia. I was running the New York City Marathon. I had actually run into a mom in the waiting room at this appointment and her daughter. And I waved to her daughter from far away because CF patients can't mingle for infection control reasons. And the mom told me like how grateful she was that I was an advocate and how much her daughter looked up to me. And that was such a beautiful moment. But then when I was handed this mental health questionnaire, I felt like such an imposter because I wasn't handling anything well. I guess I just hadn't realized the emotional toll that having CF and growing up with a chronic illness had taken on me. And I'm so glad that the CF Foundation and our world has evolved to talk about mental health more openly because it is so important. You know, I worry about these generations that are growing up with social media because I know how it affects my mental health whenever I scroll. And so, yeah, I think realizing the toll that a chronic illness can take on somebody is a really important aspect. And that's whether you have CF, diabetes, I mean, the list goes on and on. When you're dealing with a chronic illness day in and day out, it is tough. And so it makes sense that it would take a toll. And so I think always checking in with yourself and getting help where and how you need it is of the utmost importance. I know I still struggle with anxiety, and I'm still trying to figure out how best to work that through. But I think, thank God we're talking about it. Thank God it is a discussion finally. Because I really could have benefited from it being a discussion earlier than when I was 24. And, to be honest, much of this is what inspired even starting a deeper look. Because as a child who did look well, but was actually fighting a battle that many people didn't understand or assumed I wasn't, I did yearn for people to take a deeper look at me and what it took for me to show up every day at school. 2 hours of breathing treatments, no joke for a child. And I think it's important to keep that in mind as we go through our daily lives with everyone, knowing that when you pull back the curtain, you might be surprised what you find. And you might have a little bit more empathy and perspective when you do. So I guess we'll end on that note. I hope this was informative. There was a little bit of science in there, a very little bit, and mostly just my personal experience with CF. I'm happy to share more if this prompted more questions. Send them my way. Maybe there's a part 2. In me, I guess it wasn't that bad talking to myself because I did have the questions to guide me. So maybe it's not my last solo episode, to be decided. But I have some incredible guests coming up. I'm so excited about the summer lineup. So keep tuning in. Thank you so much for listening. Leave your comments and questions and subscribe. And yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. If you are loving these conversations, please share with a friend or 5 and leave me a review because I would love to hear your feedback. And if you have an idea for a future guest, head on over to our Instagram @DeeperLookPod and comment who you'd like to get to know on a deeper level. New episodes drop every Wednesday. I'll see you next week on A Deeper Look.